Off and racing. A government-approved flood wall destroys 500 houses and protects Flemington racecourse ahead of the Melbourne Cup.
Crisis at Hershey's as Putin's price hike leads to possible pre-Halloween candy shortages.
Nord Stream pipeline sabotage. Spills detected from possible explosions. Why it has nothing to do with America.
And how does the $10 billion James Webb telescope stack up against the latest from Samsung and Apple? We find out later on INN News.
High and dry, trackside of the Flemington Floodwall. Information News Network with Brian Sockington and Sandy Hosier.
Plus, sport and pride. What's the big deal? Joe finds out which sports stars are refusing to wear the rainbow.
And our own qualified meteorologist Jane Bunion with the weather outlook for the Melbourne Cup.
A rain bomb of atomic proportion has exploded over Victoria, leaving thousands of homes across the state inundated by floodwaters. Regional townships are receiving support from the Australian Defence Force, while up to 500 homes around the inner city suburb of Flemington have been left devastated by the catastrophic event. But the Spring Racing Carnival is set to kick off at the famous Flemington racecourse, spared from flooding by a government-approved floodwall built by the Victorian Racing Club over 10 years ago. And that means a return to the glitz and glamour of the Melbourne Cup, for those lucky enough not to be bucketing floodwater out of their lounge rooms. Christina Solich begins our coverage.
And it's very elegant. 10 Group 1.
It's the race that stops a nation. Melbourne's biggest party set to take over the dry, pristine lawns of the Flemington racecourse once again. Up to 90,000 socialites, alcoholics and problem gamblers ready to kick up their heels thanks to the VRC and state government's decision in 2007 to erect this huge flood wall around the 1.3 square kilometre floodplain the racecourse was built on. CEO of Racing Victoria, Andrew Jones, told Channel 9's Today Show that while the flood wall has created a difficult situation for nearby residents, he was ultimately pleased with the decision.
VRC took steps to flood-proof or flood-protect its property, which it's entitled to do. That's obviously had unintended consequences for neighbouring residents.
Of course, racing is a winner's game, and with a turnover of $1.88 billion from wagering last year, taxed at 10% by the Labor government, it's no surprise that all measures have been taken to safeguard the Melbourne Cup, no matter what the circumstance. And while there were a few party-pooping protesters opposed to the construction of a flood wall so close to their houses, most Melburnians adopted a more laid-back approach to the decision.
Those protesters can't even get the basics right. Floodplains get flooded. You're the VRC. You made $172 million in revenue last year, and you own a venue that hosts a racing carnival turning over $724 million in 4 days. You're definitely going to be walling off that racecourse. I mean, they could probably finish Trump's wall too.
Well, I'm very sorry for all the flooded peoples, but I love the racing. You wear something sexy, you have the champagne, you push the hot boys in the toilet, and maybe if I win some monies, I go buy those flooded people a coffee or something.
So while it may be a sad time for some, Melbourne's spring priorities are as apparent as ever.
Floodwaters are threatening racecourses right across the state, but the main focus in Melbourne today, of course, will be the Caulfield Cup. Fingers crossed that everything is going to be okay for the Spring Racing Carnival.
Ready to go.
And with the racecourse as dry as a martini, all is set for the 162nd running of the Melbourne Cup, the equal 67th best Group 1 horse race in the world. Christina Solich, INN News.
The Andrews government has backed an investigation into the impact the Flemington floodwall has had on nearby residents currently underwater. The investigation will be conducted by Melbourne Water, which is owned by the Victorian government and chaired by John Thwaites, who was Deputy Victorian Premier and Water Minister for Labor when they approved the wall in 2007. And to ensure a favourable outcome for the government, Nick Wimbush will lead the investigation after his stellar work preventing a review of Labour's Westgate Tunnel project, currently $4.1 billion over budget, from being released publicly. Good choice. We cross live now to INN's The Drudge in the INN Supercopter for an update on the Flemington floods. The Drudge, what are you noticing up there? Yes, you can see just how well the wall is keeping water off the racecourse where it would have been and into areas that aren't hosting the famous race. Just how close did the racecourse get to having water on it? Wow, incredible. And turning our attention for a moment to the unlucky ones living near the floodwall. When will they get their properties cleaned up? I mean, high-profile guests are already arriving. Oh well, it's unsightly, isn't it, for a big international event like this? Ha! You are a naughty one, the Drudge. Perhaps their luck will turn around with a little wager on the fillies. Maybe a little money for repairs and refurbishing? Yes, well, you've got to be in it to win it, they say. By the way, do you have a cup tip for our viewers? Ha! Sounds like a certainty. Thanks, the Drudge, and we'll see you again soon. There you go, the hot tip from the Drudge there. Yet another reason to watch INN, Sandy.
Oh, I don't gamble on the horses, Brian, but I've got $500 on Richard Wilkins' son winning fashions on the field this year.
Another great tip. You know, I've never understood fashion. All those people seem so clothes-minded.
Oh, yes, yes, very good, Brian. In a year already filled with crisis, the CEO of Hershey's chocolate company has announced possible candy shortages just weeks before the annual candy-consuming holiday of Halloween. But almost like magic, news programs around the world began to air story after story on America's third largest candy company, reminding viewers about all the delicious candy they sold and the possible risk of running out. Due to supply chain issues and high inflation caused by Vladimir Putin's unprovoked war on Ukraine. Does anyone hear that? The shocking news of the possible candy shortage is already causing families to fracture, forcing parents to explain the concept of scarcity to their kids, clearly unable to understand in this age of entitlement. Mainstream media are doing their best to ensure regular folk are information on who is to blame for the possible candy shortage. Who's doing that?
Hershey's has warned of a shortage of sweets over the Halloween holiday period due to the Ukrainian war.
Hershey says they will not be able to meet Halloween demand this year. The company is blaming the war in Ukraine.
Hershey warned yesterday that it will have a shortage. Supply chain issues and the war in Ukraine have made it hard to get all of the ingredients.
Putin. You should be blaming Putin, if anybody, for this. And to not blame Putin, first of all, is denying reality. And second, frankly, I think is un-American.
But with candy now on the line, everyday Americans are being hit right in the gut where they feel it most. And they weren't about to take the news lightly. The White House joining the blame train.
Democrats didn't cause this problem. Vladimir Putin did. It is largely the fault of Vladimir Putin. Putin's price hike.
Putin's tax.
Are you guys just going to start blaming Putin for everything?
Inflation is a global challenge. The war that Putin started in Ukraine that has caused inflation.
Putin finger-pointing was expected, a calculated effort to ensure the public's continued support of the current US strategy to address supply chain and inflation issues. That is, sending approximately $228 million each day to Ukraine to ensure they have the aid and military equipment needed to defeat Russia and end shortages and inflation, and ensure children around the world get all the candy they think they deserve. Brian, even Halloween has become politicized these days. But in news just in, the latest figures from Hershey suggest the company is about to post yet another record profit for the year, following record profits throughout the pandemic. And it seems the shortages of Hershey stock hasn't actually occurred anywhere.
So it's entirely possible that the media attention was just native advertising for Hershey's and government talking points.
I'd say it's probable, Brian.
A little spooky, I'd say. Two mysterious blasts, 17 hours apart, have been detected at the controversial Nord Stream pipelines, causing up to 400,000 tons of natural gas, composed mostly of methane, to spew into the Baltic Sea. World leaders and officials were quick to point the finger at Russia, who have an intimate knowledge of the pipelines, given that they own them. But as rival nations open alternative pipelines in the same area and in the same week as the incident, analysts are scrambling to understand why the Russians would bomb their own $9.8 billion asset and how the sabotage is connected to Putin's playbook. Joining us now from a secret unmarked government surveillance ship in the Baltic Sea.
Who said I was on a ship, Brian? No one said I was on a ship.
Oh, yes, right. From an undisclosed location now is political correspondent Tony Nito. Tony, first, I want to thank you for your courage out there.
Yeah, remember, loose lips sink ships, Brian.
Right. May I begin by asking about some popular conspiracy theories that are emerging online that seem to point to the United States of all places?
Well, Brian, nobody wants to implicate anyone other than Russia here. In fact, the Washington Post has already reported that EU officials have stated, quote, "No one on the European side of the ocean is thinking anything other than Russian sabotage." Also saying only Russia has the motivation, capability, and, quote, submersible equipment to conduct an attack like this.
But why, Tony, would they take out Nord Stream? It's generating $8 billion a quarter, just as other US-backed pipelines open up in the very same region.
Yeah, Brian, you're breaking up a bit, but it's a bit difficult to understand the mind of a madman like Putin. You have to remember that Putin's not only evil and insane, but he's got blood cancer, Parkinson's disease, paralysis in the right arm, COVID, and is terminally ill, according to US-Ukrainian intelligence.
I want to play a short video of President Biden, which seems to be a source for many of the conspiracy theories.
There will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that?
Oh my God, get in his ear! Joe, don't tell him we're blowing it up, big guy.
We will, I promise you, we'll be able to do it.
Great save, Joe.
Obviously, Tony, this is just a super busy guy speaking off the cuff. I mean, no smoking gun here, right?
There's absolutely no smoking gun here. Obviously, Biden has his senior moments from time to time. I mean, we can all forgive a 79-year-old man who's got the hardest job in the world for the odd error from time to time, can't we?
I understand, Tony. I'm no spring chicken either, but other reports have said the US warned the EU about a potential attack months ago, which the CIA declined to comment on.
Nah, Brian, you're breaking up, and it sounds like you're getting fed reports from Fox News. You on the Murdoch payroll over there in the studio, mate?
No, that report was from CNN and from Der Spiegel in Germany.
I can hardly hear you, Brian, but I can definitively say that there's still a lot of evidence to sort through, and it's hard to say what is true now or what may need to be true later. And remember, no one's hurting more than the Russians here, which is a good result for everyone.
Well, except the Russians.
Well, yeah.
And the EU, they receive 40% of their natural gas through that pipeline.
Yeah. You're breaking up, Brian.
Just hang up on me.
Tony Nito there with some unbiased opinion from nowhere. And now to sport with Joe the Snake Dog Sockic. Joe, it seems more sports folk have been allowed to speak out about not wanting to wear their assigned rainbow pride jerseys.
Yeah, Brian, it's upsetting, mate, because you'd think everyone would be in formation with this by now. Just wear whatever you're bloody told to. But players from Rugby League's Manly Sea Eagles are using the off-season to discuss this issue and even thank those involved for not sacking them, instead of focusing on the real problem of radical right-wing religious nutjobs in the game and their hatred of minority groups. And they're not the only ones. Here's a list of all the players you should boo for not thinking like you on INN Sports Wrap for October. They say they'd prefer not to wear the jersey because it conflicts with religious beliefs, but come on, be a man. You play for Manly, for God's sake. Just because Rugby League Chairman Peter Vlandis says you're completely within your rights not to play, doesn't mean you are. Then there's hockey player Ivan Properov. He refused to wear a pride jersey during training and was widely criticised by the media for, among other things, causing irreparable damage in the community. Russian scumbag. And what about Paris Saint-Germain footballer Idrissa Gana Gueye? Yeah, that's his bloody name, you can't make this up. Who refused to get in formation and wear the pride jersey with his teammates, Messi, Mbappe, Neymar. Why? He claims his religious upbringing in Senegal, where 97% of people approve of a 5-year prison sentence for homosexuality, had something to do with him not wanting to wear the rainbow. What about these 5 Tampa Bay Ray baseball players refusing to wear the rainbow logos during their warm-up? Incredibly, they're still allowed to play the bloody game. And what about this Kramer guy, this scumbag, refusing to wear an AIDS ribbon to show support for the LGBTQIA community back in 1995?
You don't want to wear an AIDS ribbon?
No.
But you have to wear an AIDS ribbon.
I have to?
Yes.
Yeah, see, that's why I don't want to.
Scumbag. And last, we got this Muslim women's footballer, Haneen Zarika, who also refused to wear the... We're just getting word from the ABC that they've already looked into this, and it's an inspiring story of women, and it's complicated, and let's move on. Actually, that's the end of sport. Please take over, Brian.
Absolutely, Joe. Looking forward to our own Pride episode.
Wait, what? What? When? What am I wearing?
Over to the weather now, and Jane, I can't wait to frock up with you on our Melbourne Cup date, but of course, it's not all fun and games with the ongoing flood and climate crisis, so how will this year's race be affected? And should we wear gumboots, Jane?
I'm not even sure how that would work, Sans, but I'm looking forward to the girls' day out on the track too. But we have to be mindful of our rapidly warming Earth that's creating the wet and cool conditions causing the floods in the lead up to this race. The typically dry racecourse conditions have gotten damper as a result, but this dampness is not as wet as it would have been had it been dry before the flooding event. So when the flooding of the racecourse was prevented by the Floodwall, the wetness stayed away for long enough for the dampness of the track to dry out, meaning conditions will be much the same as in any other year for the start of the race. In weather news now, extreme conditions are likely to continue in other parts of the world. Hurricane Nicole has been declared a Category 1 storm, but that shouldn't affect the Melbourne Cup being located off the coast of Florida in the United States. But bring a poncho just in case. And now, once again, our exclusive 9.5-day forecast. And you can see here that temperatures around the world are a little lower than we would expect for this time of the year. But our INN weather modelling kicks in at around day 4 here. So correcting for CO2 and people with gas stoves, we can expect a return to the usual unbearable heat waves by the start of next week, Sandy.
And that was the news for October 2022.
Please spare some time to help us produce our next show by donating what you think INN is worth, a cup of coffee, a day's work,
or a sneaky $10 billion if you have it lying around. Just pop into innformationnews.com where you can catch up on all the news you missed, or visit our store, or maybe donate some money to keep us on the air. But for now, may our news be your views, and goodbye.
Goodbye now.